All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Just some housekeeping things. Feel free to put questions in the chat. Raise your hand to come off mute, and we can have an interactive discussion. I'm assuming everybody can see the deck. You should see a title slide here. So we are here today to talk about HCX and migrations using HCX to Azure VMware Solution. And my name's Trevor Davis. I work at Microsoft and been here for a little over 2 years and focus solely on Azure VMware Solution. Imad?
Thanks, Trevor. My name is Ahmad Yunus. I've been at VMware for over 6+ years now. Variety of different roles, but currently working across all the VMware cloud solutions, and one of them is Azure VMware Solution.
Victor?
Hey guys, my name is Victor Sandoval. I'm a senior staff solutions architect. I focus purely on Azure VMware Solution from VMware.
All right. So if everybody's not aware or haven't seen it yet, we actually have a way to test drive Azure VMware Solutions via the VMware Hands-On Labs. And the VMware Hands-On Labs, if you're not familiar, are basically interactive click-by-click demos, which provides you a guide on the right hand. So currently we have about 4 labs today that you can try out. The Deployment and Connectivity Lab, which basically goes through the provisioning and connectivity for on-premises to an Azure VMware Solution private cloud. We also have the DR lab with SRM. We have an SD-WAN connectivity lab. And then finally, we have the migration with VMware HCX, which we'll be going through today. So highly recommend checking them out. You can try them as many times as you like. There's no expiration. Also, feel free to give us any feedback, or if there's other features or functionality you'd like to see or labs, feel free to reach out. So the link down at the bottom is that short link that will take you right to that main page, and you'll be able to just click get started with the lab.
Okay. So this session is not really to focus on the inner workings of AVS and how it all gets wired up and even what it is, but just to level set here for everybody. So Azure VMware Solution, if you're not aware, it's a VMware SDDC within an Azure data center. It is a first-party solution. It's a Azure service like any other Azure service. What Azure VMware Solution is under the covers is it's bare metal dedicated infrastructure, and it's a VMware cluster that comes with vCenter, HCX, NSX, ESX, and vSAN. And what you're seeing here on this screen is a high-level base foundation network design. And generally speaking, customers are connected to Azure with an express route, but you can be connected with a VPN. Then what we're doing is we are taking the AVS private cloud and we're wiring it to the Azure backbone within an internal express route. That's part of the solution. It's not an extra cost. It's just part of the solution. So from AVS to your other VNets or your on-prem environment, you have a high-speed Azure backbone straight to the edge or straight to the Azure VNets. And now, right, okay, so you got it stood up, so now what? Right? You need to, generally speaking, customers want to migrate workloads from their on-prem environment to AVS. And because HCX comes with AVS, generally, 99.9% of the time, this is what customers use to migrate their workloads. And what HCX is at a high level is it will set up a IPsec tunnel from on-prem to your AVS cluster, and then you can migrate those workloads in varying ways, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But high level, you can live migrate them, i.e. vMotion, or do bulk migration, and we'll talk about those different options. Within HCX, it does some really cool stuff, right? So it does optimize and WAN accelerate, right? There is a WAN accelerator built in. And you, in addition to the ability to move the workloads, you can also take and extend your networks from on-prem to AVS, which is a very popular thing. And actually, VMware has made some advances in that side of HCX, specifically giving it more redundancy and more availability built into that network extension capability, and then also optimizing routing for that network extension. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail as we move forward.
So Trevor, if I may jump in, can you go back to the slide for a sec? So with VMware HCX, as Trevor said, you get an encrypted tunnel it's an IPsec tunnel using sweep-B encryption, right? And some of the cool features of HCX is if you're running an older version of vSphere as far back as 6.x, right? You'll be able to migrate those workloads to Azure VMware solution. So that's one thing I want to call out, that if you are running an older unsupported version of vSphere, 6.0, all the way up to the latest and greatest, you'll be able to migrate those workloads. As part of HCX, natively, we'll be able to do L2 extensions. With the release of HCX 4.3, we have network extension HA. It's an active passive solution that's in EA. So definitely give it a try, provide us feedback. We also, as part of it, there's WAN optimization, dedupe, compression, all built in. It's an appliance that gets deployed as part of HCX. And then we provide different mobility options depending on your SLA. So with HCX, you'll get cold migration, you'll get vMotion, but then you also have things that are native to HCX like replication-assisted vMotion, which is basically live migration, where we're copying the data across, and then the cutover is a live vMotion. But then we have bulk migration, which is low downtime, similar to vMotion, or similar to replication-assisted vMotion, but the cutover is a shutdown of the source and then the bring up of the destination. So again, several different migration types to choose from. As far as migration from on-premises to Azure VMware solution, we support it over either a VPN connection or using an express route. So those are a few things that I just wanted to add as Trevor was talking.
Oh, also, one of the other key things that customers really liked is those customers who have VPNs from on-prem to Azure, HCX now supports VPN. You don't have to have a dedicated express route. There's a question here. So do you need express route to set up? No. Yeah, as of a few months back, VMware supports VPN. You're welcome. Okay. All right. So I think we're going to do the lab now, right? So
yeah. Jump into the lab.
Is VPN officially supported? Yes. There are support statements out there. So while Imad is bringing up the demo in detail, what VMware does is they'll kind of outline the network underlay requirements. Well, you need this amount of latency, you need, this amount of bandwidth. There's varying, there's prescriptive guidelines, but yeah, as long as you fall within those, then you're good to go. And like, well, you can do network extension, but you need this. If you want to just do bulk migration, then, you need to fall within these parameters, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, it's official. Can HCX work in conjunction with other layer 2 extension technologies? We already have L2 stretch to our secondary data center for SRM. Imad, you want to take that one?
Yeah, it does.
And I assume, Brian, you're asking for you're doing layer 2 extension on-prem, and then you're talking about doing layer 2 extension to AVS. So.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So as soon as you jump into the lab, now that you've seen this image, we showed it early on, we'll get started. Some things we want to highlight. The lab has, the service has updated, I should say, and the lab is a little bit behind. So stay tuned. We are working on updating the lab. So we'll call out what has changed. In the past, HCX was deployed by default when you deployed an Azure VMware Solution Private Cloud, or I should say at least the cloud side was deployed. Now it's not. And HCX is an add-on just like Site Recovery Manager is. So one of the things that you would do once you have your private cloud is you would click add-ons and then you would just deploy HCX. And what that does is it deploys the HCX Cloud Manager on the AVS side of the house. And once that's deployed, you need the connector. So think of it as, the communication is coming from the source to destination. So the connector is always at the source, and the cloud side is always, or the HCX Cloud Manager is always on the destination. And now the only exception to that is when you have, let's say 2 AVS instances, then they both would be 2 HCX Cloud Managers on each side. You wouldn't need the connector. So once you have HCX deployed, we go under connectivity, and you'll have actually I should take it back. Everything is going to be on the add-ons tab. So everything you're seeing here is the old way of doing it. Once you have it, it will be over in the add-ons tab. So typically here we'll grab the IP address once we have it deployed, and we'll log into the HCX Cloud Manager.
So just for everybody's clarification, right, when HCX gets deployed, as Imad was saying, right, that IP address gets assigned, and it gets assigned from that IP space you fed in during the AVS deployment.
Yep. Okay, so here we're going to go under System Updates, and we're going to click Request Download Link. Now, this is what you're going to do to be able to deploy the HCX connector for your on-premises environment, which will allow you to be able to do the site pairing and start migrating workloads. So here we're going to go ahead and download the OVA.
Yeah, and that download is happening, just so everybody's for sure we knows that download is happening in your on-prem environment, right? All this activity of installation and configuring is all happening in the cluster within your data center.
So here I'm logging into my on-premises vCenter server. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy a new OVA. And there's my connector. And just like any OVA, you're going to give it a name. Select where you want to deploy it to. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and deploy it to my management cluster. Go through the EULA and select the data store where I'm going to deploy it to. Go ahead and give it the network. In this case, it's going to be our management network. And in here, just giving it the CLI admin password and the root password.
While you're typing that in, there's a question with HCX being an add-on, is there an additional cost? No, there's not an additional cost. It's broken out. So you can deploy it if you want, and we're not forcing you to deploy it if you don't need it or have no use for it. So no additional cost.
It's for free. And again, you don't need to deploy it initially, but when you do need it, it's there for you. And then once you're done, if you need to uninstall it, you also have the option to uninstall it as well. Okay, so we're just going through here, just like any OVA, giving it, network information, IP address, gateway, mask, DNS. DNS is very important. Make sure that, you have it configured and configured correctly. In this case, I'm doing 2. And putting in my domain and NTP. That's another caveat here. Make sure that NTP is also configured correctly. Those are probably the top 2 things I would say, like if something goes wrong, make sure that you check DNS and NTP. If everything looks good, we're going to go ahead and click finish. And we should be able to see. Yep. So we have our HCX manager. We're going to go ahead and power it on. And now we're logging into the connector. So again, this is all being done from on-prem. The assumption here, by the way, is we've already established all the required connectivity during the deployment. In this case, we actually have an express route going from on-premises environment into AVS. And now we're going to go back in here and we're going to get a key. And the key activation is just like you see it. This hasn't really changed. You'll be able to get up to 3 keys. Just give the key a name. I personally do it by location. That way I can keep track of where and what keys I've used. And it'll go ahead and give you a key from the Azure console. Then we'll go back into the connector, paste that key in, and activate. Now, if for whatever reason you can't activate, again, check your connectivity, check your firewall rules. So HCX does that. That's probably one thing we should kind of pause here and talk about. HCX does have some firewall rule requirements. So highly recommend going out to the VMware ports site and checking those out. And based off what functionality you're using for HCX will determine what firewall ports you'll need to open up. So you don't need to open up all the ports. For example, if you're not using, OS assisted migration, then you don't need to open up those ports. But so check out the the VMware ports site for all that information as well. Yeah. Also, the maximum site is another important site, and we have a resource slide at the end that we'll show you as well. So here, as we start kind of deploying,
let me just add something there. So I think what Ahmad brings up is really key, and what I think Victor and I see during implementations with customers is that the thing that really is turns out to be problematic around the HCX deployment is not the technology necessarily, but the fact of there's a firewall between Azure and the on-prem environment. And there's some non-standard ports that need to get opened up. And so, doing that due diligence ahead of time, understanding what you're going to do, and then getting all the networking in place, that's just going to save you so much time during the implementation.
So here we're entering in the location of the connector. Now this will be used for the site pairing, which we'll show you here in about a second. We're giving the connector our FQDN name, and we're done. We just gotta do a reboot. So once once that's done, we will go ahead and connect it to the vCenter. Now with HCX, it's a one-to-one relationship to vCenter. So for the connector, you can only have it, registered to one vCenter. So in this case, we're registering our connector to our on-premises vCenter server. In this case, I have a service account that I'm using. I don't want to use my administrator at vSphere.local. And then we'll go ahead and provide the identity source, which in this case is our vCenter.
So just to add something there on the the account being used, and as you saw, Imad there mentioned that we didn't want to use administrator vSphere.local, but do be aware that if you decide for HCX to use something different than the vSphere.local group for HCX administration, make sure that the user that you're logging in with actually has all the rights that HCX requires, and there's documentation out there of what the HCX administrator rights need to be. Because what we've also seen in the field is, customers will log in with their, whatever at, company.com email address, because that's an identity source. They've integrated with AD. And they think they have all the right permissions, but in reality they don't, and we end up falling back to administrator vSphere.local just to kind of get through it. So again, the prep ahead of the deployment is going to be key.
Right. That's a good point. So here, where it says identity sources here, this is the platform services controller, or PSC, of the vCenter server. So depending on what kind of configuration you're running for vCenter, whether it's an embedded deployment or external deployment, this is where you're going to enter in the platform services controller. So in our case, our platform services controller is running as a native service within vCenter, so it's embedded. So we'll just provide the vCenter FQDN. But if your platform services controller is external, then you'll go ahead and put in the FQDN for the platform services controller here. So once that's done, we are ready to reboot our appliance, and we are up and running. So now we've actually deployed. So now on both ends, we have the Cloud Manager running in AVS. We have the HCX connector running in our on-premises environment, as you can see here. So the next step that we want to do is actually we want to go ahead and start the site pairing. So from the vSphere web client, we're able to do this. Now, by the way, HCX, just a little tidbit, also has a standalone client if you want to use that as well. Or once it's registered with vCenter, it's within the vSphere client as well. So here we're going to go to site pairing. We're going to go ahead and connect to our remote site. Now, again, this is initiated from source to destination. So our source is our on-premises environment. Our destination is AVS. So we're going to go back here to AVS, and we're going to go ahead and copy this IP address of the Cloud Manager, paste it in here, and then the username and password, again, is from the Azure console. Now, you're using the same login as the AVS vCenter server. So here we're going to go ahead and copy the Cloud Admin account and the password. And if we've done everything correctly, we should be able to site pair. So again, if you have the right connectivity, the right DNS, the right NTP, the right firewall rules, the right account used to register, you should successfully get to this point where you have, your on-premises environment and your Azure VMware solution site pair completed successfully. Do we have any questions up to this point, or are we good?
There's been questions popping into the chat, but Victor's been answering them. So I think we're good. No new. Somebody just asked about HCX, to clarify the point you made about one HCX manager and yes, it's one HCX manager per vCenter.
Yep. So
and
one-to-one
then-
relationship.
Yeah. And you could do, for just to further dive into that, you can have you can do multiple clusters with that HCX manager. It's just one HCX manager per vCenter, correct?
Oh yeah. So what winds up happening is once you register it to the vCenter server, it sees the inventory, and you'll see that here as we go through and actually do a migration. It will be able to see the entire, all the clusters, everything that you have, depending on how you have your, your network connection set up to which cluster and what's going to be migrated. All right.
And if you do, just to kind of further expound on that, if you are, and I think Victor and I run into this also, right, is you'll have multiple vCenter environments on-prem, right? And so, or you may have two separate sites on-prem that you want to migrate workloads to AVS to. You would just set up, what we're showing you here, you would just do that again on that other cluster or on that other vCenter, because you can hang multiple vCenters off the cloud vCenter or the cloud HCX.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to create our network profile, and we use this this profile basically provides what configuration HCX is going to use. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and set up our we have two clusters. So the majority of the VMs that we are migrating are coming from our compute cluster, right? Our management cluster, we just have our management infrastructure there, so our HCX manager will get deployed there. But the VMs that we're migrating are coming from our compute cluster. So this profile is basically going to tell HCX, what network to use, when we create the compute profile, you'll see also like what data store, what cluster, things like that. So think of it as kind of definitions that we're telling HCX to use, so that way it understands what inventory and where to look and what networks to use as well. So in this case, we're using our compute cluster. We're going to go ahead and give it an IP. We're giving it basically an IP pool, a range that it's going to use. Now, we actually have a calculator, if you notice right above where it says how many free IP addresses do you need. If you click on that and put in some information, it will, things like number of VMs and whatnot, it will tell you actually how many IP addresses you need. In this case, we're giving it a pool of 3 IP addresses. We're giving it our DNS information and our DNS suffix, and we're going to hit create. And it's that simple. So now we actually have a network profile that we're going to use. The next piece of this is we're going to go ahead, as part of that, is create the vMotion network. So we're telling it which network to use for vMotion as part of this profile. So it's a separate profile from the other profile that we used for management. So you have management, and then you have the vMotion network.
And while Imad fills this out, what we're finding, what the requirement is for this is that if your vMotion port group does not exist on vSwitch 0 or a distributed port group, you won't be able to find it in that list. So what we're finding during implementations is that if vMotion is not on vSwitch 0 or a distributed port group, you have to bring that port group to meet those requirements.
Yep. And by the way, if you're running a standard switch, we don't support L2 extension of a standard switch. So if you're still running a standard switch and you need to do L2 extension, I recommend talking to your VMware rep, or even reaching out to your Azure VMware solution resource representative, and they can work out something to get you on a distributed switch to be able to extend those networks. Okay, now we have our two network profiles created, separated out. So we got vMotion and we got management. Next thing we're going to do is going to create a compute profile, and this is where we're going to tell it what cluster, what data store, and things like that to that we're going to be using, and what uplinks. So here we're going to give it a name. Now here you can see that we have services now based off of the license. Now by default, HCX Advanced is what comes with AVS. So if you need to upgrade to Enterprise, I'll let Trevor speak to that more, because there is a process within AVS to get an Enterprise HCX Enterprise license key. So the services that you see here, like the replication assisted vMotion, OSS migration, SRM integration, those are not enabled by default, and it requires an HCX Enterprise license key.
Yeah, and Victor put a link to this in the chat if anybody's interested in the gory details of it. But in short, what we're doing is we're providing HCX Enterprise free of charge for, as the article says here, a minimum of 12 months. And this article was released October 4th of 2021. So again, the link is there. So
so some of the features that you're probably wondering about, the differences, of course it's in the documentation, but the two that I would want to highlight are the replication assisted vMotion, right? So think of it as vMotion on steroids, right? So you can migrate thousands of VMs, and the cutover again is just a vMotion where we're just copying the Delta sinks, and then the cutover is a vMotion. The other one that I want to highlight is what's called mobility groups. And as part of our wave planning process, you can go in and put these VMs in some sort of logical order. So let's say you've done your dependency mappings, or you've done your discovery for your migration, and you know that you want to put these VMs based off of, let's say, either a particular network or a particular application, however you want to group them. Mobility groups allows you to do that, and then you can select that group and migrate the particular group. So those are just two of the many features that HCX Enterprise has that I want to highlight. So here we're going to go ahead and select the compute cluster, and again, this is on the on-premises side where our VMs reside, and these are the VMs that we are going to be migrating from. Okay, now here, if we want to do any kind of, well, let me take a step back. Here, we're going to go ahead and select, the compute cluster again for the deployment resource and reservation. But as part of this, we'll give it the data store. So here we have our compute vSAN data store, and in the folder, which is optional, but I like to actually select the folder where some of the VMs are running from. The other thing here is you actually have an option to do some appliance reservation settings if you want. We're going to go ahead and select the network profile that we created prior to this. You'll select here for the management. Now, let's say you didn't create it for whatever reason. If you come in here, you'll have the option, as you can see here, to go ahead and create the network profile. So if you forget or you haven't done it, you can come in here, no problem, and do it at the same time. Kill two birds with one stone, I guess. So here we'll select our management. Here we're going to go ahead and select our uplink that's going to provide our connectivity. Now in this case we're selecting our management. You could have a separate uplink, if you have enough connections. Our vMotion network. One thing I like about this setup is it just guides you straight forward. And then here is we're going to go ahead and provide it the distributed switch. And if everything works out, you should be able to see and review all the connections. So you can see here we got the WAN connections, and it tells you, what protocols are being used, the purpose, and then you can click on the LAN connections, and it will give you a similar view. And there you go. So here it also gives you the TCP ports and everything. So to me, this is also another way to validate, do I have all my firewall ports open? But it's kind of I would say it's kind of almost a little late, because you want to make sure you have your firewall ports all established before getting to this point, because you also need to be able to do the site pairing. The other thing is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but as we're building this out, the background image is also showing you what the connectivity looks like as well. So see, it kind of shows you, our HCX manager going to our, data center network, our management over here, connecting into our compute cluster, our vMotion network. So now we're going to go ahead and...
Eman, there's a question. Do special configurations get migrated with the virtual machine with HCX, like, for example, reservations or affinity and anti-affinity rules?
So the anti-affinity rules, I believe, do not. The reservations, I'm not 100% sure. I can get back to you on that one, unless Victor, off the top of your head.
No. So the configurations do not get extended. So affinity rules had to be recreated, and
Yep.
Same thing for reservations, because the compute platform is different between your on-premises environment and in AVS.
Yep. Okay, so we got our compute profile, our network profile. Now we're going to basically create our service mesh, and this is basically an orchestrated way to take these profiles and tell HCX, go ahead and create, this type of config, and it's going to go ahead and deploy our network extension. It's going to deploy our WAN optimization, our IX, our interconnect. We call it IX or interconnect, which basically takes care of our vMotion and our replication that happens. Which, by the way, behind the scenes for replication, we're using vSphere replication, in case anybody's wondering. So here we're going to go ahead and select our sites. And from that, we're going to go ahead, from each site, we're going to go ahead and select our compute profiles. Now, the good news is, as you're doing this on your source destination, you're probably wondering, like, do I need to do this also on the destination? The good news is no, right? So you only do this on the source, which is your on-premises environment. And as part of that process, it's going to go ahead and take care of creating the profiles on the destination, which is AVS. It's another question that pops up. So as you can see here, I never created a profile on the AVS side. It automatically gave it a name, created it for me. And as you can see, it's also building out that image that we saw. Okay, so what services are we going to enable? So the green check marks are the ones that we're going to have enabled. So by default, we're going to go ahead and have, our hybrid interconnect. So the IX, the WAN optimization, vMotion, bulk migration, which is, very low downtime, network extension, and disaster recovery. In this case, is checked, but that's been basically removed or no longer in use. So you don't even have to worry about that. As a matter of fact, just ignore that you've even seen that. You didn't see anything.
So there's another question about what version of vSphere replication. I don't know if that's even relevant, simply because it's very much a plumbing component of HCX, right? So
yes.
You deploy version, 4 dot whatever of HCX. It's got some version of vSphere replication. It's not like you have to integrate it with your vSphere replication. You have to worry about some compatibility. It's really just
it's under the covers, right?
It's under the covers.
So the replication happens under the covers. HCX handles all that. There's nothing you need to do. So it's not like if you ever used SRM where you have to do, something with, vSphere replication. If you're using vSphere replication with SRM, here it's under the covers. There's nothing you need to do from a configuration perspective. And we'll show you that here in a little bit. Okay, so here there's nothing. If you want to go ahead and do a scale out for additional network extension appliances, you can do it here, or you can actually do it after the fact. In our case, we only need one network appliance or network extension appliance that we're planning to do. Also HCX has some traffic engineering, some advanced configurations that you can do for like TCP flow, path resiliency, things like that. We actually have these documented as well in case you need to take care of that.
Yeah, those features do come with the enterprise, right? So that's definitely another great advantage. What you see there is just bandwidth limiting. So with advanced, if you want to, make sure HCX doesn't fill up your pipe in the middle of the business day, this is where you would do that.
Yep. All right. So here's our new topology between the two sites, and I like this. You can actually like zoom in. You can take a screenshot of this. There's one question I always get is like, can you export this out? And the answer is no. So that's why I always just kind of say like, take a screenshot if you want to export this out. Okay, so with everything, we're going to go ahead and give this a name. So this is what our interconnect appliance is going to be called. Go ahead and click finish. And it's going to go out here and start creating and deploying our service mesh, which deploys our appliance. So if you go under the tasks, it's going to go through and show you exactly what's happening step by step. Now, I like this view also because if you do run into any issues, it tells you which step it's running into issues. So like as it goes through, it's going to validate the service mesh, is going to prepare the pools. So the network pools that you created early on, right? It's going to check resource availability on the destination side. So that's another good thing that HCX does, is it's making sure that, okay, you do have the right amount of resources on the destination. And if everything is, good to go, we're going to get that, green check mark. Service mesh is now created. So our appliances are now deployed. So you can see here that the SJC Interconnect 01 appliance was deployed. The other thing you also want to check is the tunnel status. Now, sometimes this may be delayed, so don't panic. Maybe give it a minute or two to make sure that the tunnel status is up. If it's not up, then there's something wrong, and you're going to have to do some troubleshooting. And HCX does have some areas where you can actually see some of the the tunnel information, and even for the CLI is also handy from that perspective. Okay, so if everything looks good, you should see something similar to your service mesh. So you have your site pairing on your left-hand side, and then all the services that were enabled should have that little green circle. If you have any service that has, like, let's say a little question mark, that means something wasn't configured right. So again, that's another thing you need to make sure that you check that everything is actually green and healthy. Basically at this point, we now have site pairing and connectivity established. The next piece that we're going to do is go ahead and do the network extension. And network extension is pretty easy with HCX. It's a few clicks. So here we're going to extend our VLAN 10, which is our applications network. We're going to go ahead and give the gateway address. Also the mask as well. And then here we're just going to go ahead and click extend, and that's it. I mean, it's, as you can see, it's like 2-3 clicks, not even clicks. It's like 2 clicks and entering in the network information, and you're done. So it's that simple, and you can do multiple extensions. Again, in this example, we're only doing one, but you can do multiple extensions. Now, this is where I would go out and look at the maximums and see how many max network extensions per HCX network extension appliance are supported. So that's another key thing to look at. Now that we have our network extension in place, we're going to go ahead and get ready to migrate. So we're going to click on migrate. And one thing I want to call out here. So here you can see that we have our source and we have our destination, right? You have a box here if you want to do a reverse migration. So if you ever, I've seen this in case of like somebody wanting to test as a backup plan, because you always want to make sure that, as part of your change control window, okay, what happens if something goes wrong? Am I going to be able to, bring this VM back if I need to for whatever reason, right? But so far, like, it's very rare that I've seen it happen, but you do have that option as if you ever needed to come back, you actually have this reverse migration. Here we're going to go ahead and so we're going to select, we can select VMs. So a couple of options here. We can select the VMs that we want, or we could do up here up top, we could do a search for, different VMs by name. So in this case, we're searching for SQL. Another thing we can do is, we're going to go ahead and select our Windows VMs as well. So there's, again, you can see like I've selected a Linux VM, a SQL VM, a Windows VM, so different flavors. Once you have the VMs that you want to migrate selected, we're going to go up here into this, transfer and placement, which is basically the global settings that are going to get applied to these VMs from a migration standpoint. So we're going to, click the compute on the destination side. So in this case, it's just the cluster, because again, with AVS, you're kind of restricted at the granular level. So we'll select the cluster 1. We're going to go ahead and provide it the workloads directory. That's where we're deploying to. Storage-wise, well, it's vSAN. So that's, as of right now, it's vSAN. I don't know, Trevor, if you want to talk about additional storage with AVS, but right now it's just, you can add additional storage, but like disk pools, but.
Yeah, so what in different versions of Preview, there's Azure Disk Pool, so you'll be able to add a nice SCSI attached data store to your cluster, and then you can target that data store as same way you would the vSAN data store or any other data store.
And here we give you the option of, do you want to keep the VM as the same format? Do you want to thick provision it or thin provision it? Of course, select what makes sense. Now, here is where we're going to select the migration type. Now, I know you only see 2. Cold migration will be available if if the VM is selected and is powered off. vMotion and bulk migration are there. We didn't have enterprise licensing key during the creation of this environment, but if we did, you would also see here replication assisted vMotion, and then if you were using something like an OS assisted migration, that would also be listed here as well. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and select vMotion because we want to migrate everything live. We want 0 downtime. We can actually schedule the cutover window here using this scheduler. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that vMotion is serialized, right? So it's going to be one at a time. So what we're going to do here at the VM level is we have some configuration that we can do. Let's say, for example, I don't want every VM to be vMotioned, right? I want this VM in particular to be bulk migrated. I can come down at the VM level and make those changes. So you can do it up at the top at the the global level, and that will get applied all the way down. But you have the option to go in and select at a per VM basis if you want to make these changes. Also, I need to tell it what is the destination network as well. So here we're going to go ahead and select our VLAN 55. Give it the network address, the gateway. So that address is what the VM is going to have when it lands in AVS, which is also pretty cool. So that way I can make sure that these VMs will automatically have the new address when it lands on the other side. Now that's if I didn't want to this particular VM wasn't on the stretched network. That's why you saw me selecting that. If it's on a stretched network, I don't have to worry about it. So now when you click validate, which I like, or even if you click go. So even if you click go and not select validate, it's still going to validate. So regardless, it's going to validate for you, which is I like it as a safety measure. So it's going to come up here and tell me like things like, hey, my my VMware tools is, not detected or out of date, or because VM tools is not, detected, that the VM may not gracefully shut down during a bulk migration. Because remember when I said bulk migration during the cutover is a shutdown of the source and to bring up a destination. So here we may not be able to gracefully shut down because of VMware tools. Also, check DNS as part of like guest customization will be reset. So I like this because it does provide you some messages about what's going to happen. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and migrate. And as you can see here from the view, it tells us some information, right? So you've got the VM name, the VM migration type, the storage size, the memory, the CPU, the progress, which it went pretty fast, and then the start and end time as well. So that's migration with HCX. Let me pause there. I know we're trying to keep up with time, make sure we can answer all the questions and give folks some time. So any questions there?
One of the questions is, are there any best practices or gotchas from doing this type of migrations? I can say from my experience, if you have a virtual machine that you plan to migrate into AVS using a layer 2 extension, just make sure that that VLAN is not used for your management components. So things like your vCenter or any of your VM kernels, because that's not a supported configuration. Your compute workloads has to be on a separate VLAN than your management components. Trevor, anything on your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to take into consideration, latency between on-prem and AVS, right? Do you really need to spend the time really understanding your applications, your application dependencies? Are you migrating them across layer 2? Are they going to be migrated and then live on layer 2 extended networks? And what does that impact have on latency to other apps, even to other VMs inside of Azure, right? So it really the time has to be spent making application groupings, and then you avoid a lot of the issues and the around, oh, I moved a VM and his or her buddy VM is not with it and it's impacting my application.
Yeah, so to add to that, proper planning, take a look at the HCX. We got some best practices out there, but some other things to consider. So as part of this, well, let's say you're migrating workloads, layer 2 stretch over a long period of time is not something that, we would recommend. I mean, if it's a long term, maybe look at something like a layer 3. So this is just kind of a way to get you to and from. The other thing to take a look at is, okay, what kind of, in a hybrid scenario, let's say, so you've migrated some workloads to AVS, you got some things still residing on-prem, they're communicating back and forth. You want to make sure, there's no tromboning of the network. Now, HCX does have a feature called mobility optimized networking, but that's part of the enterprise, licensing that helps offset that. So there are considerations there that you should take a look at. And now, like I said, with 4.3, we do have network extension HA in case we actually had some customers who said, I like this, I want to do it, but, I'm not going to do network extension over a long period of time, but I just want to make sure that as VMs are being migrated, that this network extension is going to stay up and is resilient. So that's where the network extension appliance HA comes into place, right? Again, active passive solution. It's part of 4.3, and it's right now currently in EA. So those are probably the things that I would look at as far as migrating your workloads. So as you can see here, as we were talking, I logged into the AVS vCenter server, and you can see here it's like West US-AVS, and the VMs that that we migrated early on. So the Linux VM is here, the SQL VM is here, the Windows VM is here, and of course you can see that it deploys the IX, the interconnect appliance, network extension, and the WAN optimization appliance as well, right? So those were deployed as part of our service mesh deployment when we did it from on-prem. So again, it's all done for you, which I like. Now you're probably wondering what this little guy is, and this is the vMotion proxy that HCX deploys. There's nothing you need to do there. As a matter of fact, I kind of wish I didn't point it out, but you probably will see it. So it looks like a host. You can't do anything to it. You don't want to deploy VMs to it. You don't want to do anything. Again, it's just there for the vMotion proxy configuration between HCX. You'll see it on the source. You'll see it on the destination as well. And with that, we can log into our VM here, or at least see that particular VM, because it wasn't on a L2 stretch. It got the IP address that we gave it as part of the configuration. Now HCX does have some other things as part of this, like you can have it to where you can upgrade VM tools when it lands on the destination side, or hardware version, things like that. So that's something else that I'd like to call out as part of this. And that's it. That concludes the demo.
There's a question I don't know the answer to. Is the HCX Enterprise free for 12 months, something unique to AVS and not available with other hyperscalers like VMC on AWS?
So, with VMC on AWS, it's included. Well, the HCX has enterprise functionality all included as part of that. So there's nothing you need to do separately there. But again, this session is more for AVS, so I don't want to get into the whole, talking about the other clouds, just to be mindful. But feel free to, ping me on the side, and I'm happy to talk about all the other clouds. All right, Trevor, I'll stop sharing, and you can, or you want to share the resource slide?
Sure. All right, so your typical resource slide, right? But what I do want to call out here is that the HOL is a great place. There's a link to the hands-on lab, right? You can learn about a lot about AVS, as well as a lot of supporting technologies around AVS, such as SD-WAN, and then also there are some on-demand libraries from VMworld 2021, which some of those may be dated with the information, but still a good place to look. So,
so things I want to call out really quickly. If you look at the documentation section, there's like I talked about earlier on. These are short links for the the HCX, like the ports and protocols. That's for all VMware ports for all, basically like vCenter, HCX, NSX, anything like that. Check out the ports, HCX documentation, and in the HCX release notes. Highly recommend going into the release notes, because the release notes also not only tell you what's new, but they also tell you versions of HCX that are supported from an upgrade perspective. So that's probably something like really quick. I know we're starting to kind of bump up on time. But once HCX is deployed, it is the customer's responsibility from an upgrade perspective, right? So if you go back to the HCX Cloud Manager and the connector, you'll see that if there's a new version of HCX available, you'll go ahead and click upgrade, and it will go through and take care of the upgrade for you. And that's probably, we probably don't have enough time to go through the upgrade process or talk about it. Maybe that's another, like, either blog post or another session that we do at some point, but just keep that's part of your, as the customer, that's part of your responsibilities, upgrading HCX. So check out the release notes. It has what's new. It has upgrade process. It has, some resolved issues. It's a really good resource. Highly recommend it. Yeah. And in, I guess, one other thing that we probably should highlight is Trevor and I did another session. It's kind of a unsupported tool at this point, but basically it's a way to get an end-to-end deployment up and running. I like to call it kind of a POC, way of deploying, but it's a tool. Basically, fill out a Microsoft form, you give it some information, and it will do an end-to-end deployment. And when I say end-to-end, it's not only the HCX. It's not only the private cloud, but it also does your connectivity. So from on-premises to AVS. And then it will also deploy HCX on both sides, source and destination. So everything we just did, the little, I guess, I don't like calling it an easy button, but a maybe simplified deployment, the tool that we have also will take care of all this for you. Now, the caveat, well, multiple caveats. Number one, not officially supported, so you're doing it on your own, but it's a good way to kind of understand the spin up. Number two, it doesn't really adhere to best practices when it comes to HCX, right? So basically, when we go through it, it's only letting you select one cluster and all that, so you don't really get to deploy the service meshes and all that. It handles all that for you. So it's a good way, like I said, to kind of understand the process, but it doesn't adhere to the best practices. So check that out, Trevor. I don't know if you have the link to the form that you can just throw into the chat.
Yeah, I'll put that link into the chat, and there is an email on that where you can provide Imad and I feedback on the tool, and it'll be ever evolving around, and we'll soon address things that Imad talked about, right? Where if you want multiple clusters, if you want, you can decide which multiple port groups you want to extend. We'll get very granular and even recommending where the HCX component should be installed, right? And so right now it just does it in a very vanilla sense, if you will. So
do you have the link handy?
Yeah, let me.
I think I found it. Is it
okay?
I think it's is it the aks.ms/AVS guide deploy?
Yeah, let me put it in. It's a slightly different one. That one will work, but I don't know if it's always going to be there. Give me one sec.
Okay.
All right. Let's do this.
Hopefully everybody enjoyed the session and it was beneficial and all the questions were answered. If you have any other questions or anything else, as Trevor's pasting the link to the tool. By the way, we did a session on the tool itself, so you can check that out if you have any questions. Also, feel free to hit us up. All three of us are on LinkedIn. Also, I know I'm on Twitter. Trevor's on Twitter. I don't know, Victor, you on Twitter?
No.
What you got against Twitter?
Oh, no, nothing.
Just kidding.
With that, I think that's everything. I'm sure there's more, but that's our allotted time. Like I said, if you have any questions, hit us up. Happy to help in any way we can. Great. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you, Victor.